Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. The African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which came into effect in May this year, is now in the implementation stage, and Nigeria is poised to play a major role in its march towards a single unified African market. It would be recalled that President Buhari finally signed up for it at the last meeting of the African Union in Niamey, Niger Republic. Before now, the Nigerian president had opposed the idea based on the apprehension that Nigeria's membership would lead to possible loss of jobs and exposure of the country's manufacturing sector to the vagaries of a single African market. For a deeper reflection on this, we are now joined by Ambassador Ayoola Olukanni, a Director General of Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture. Welcome to the program, sir. Good morning.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be back in the studios of Arise.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Ambassador Olukanni, good to see you again.
Thank you very much.
The moment you came into the studio, I remember when we came to Australia. You were our host ambassador.
Yes, I remember very well.
Yes, you were the ambassador to Australia.
Yes, aside from High Commissioner to Australia.
High Commissioner to Australia.
With concurrent accreditations to New Zealand, Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and Vanuatu, the entire Pacific region. But I think we had a great time with that agreement.
We did. Yes, but first, let me ask you about this African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Now, when in March 2018, Nigeria at the last minute decided not to go to Kigali to join other African countries to adopt the agreement. One of the reasons was that Chambers of Commerce in Nigeria, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, about 3,000 Nigerian companies were protesting that the government of Nigeria should not be a part of the agreement yet, that it should take a critical look at it, and they will need to make input. In May, the MAN again protested and asked President Buhari not to even bother about signing. Then the president set up a committee. The committee, led by Dr. Gubadia, submitted his report. And then, a few days ago, July 7th, to be specific also,
and like they said, the rest is history.
Then the president signed. Now, what changed? What informed these 360 degrees on the part of the Manufacturers Association and the various chambers of commerce? When you look at the environment, the original things they complained about have not even been addressed.
Yes, you're right. You're right. I think it was more of an issue of the fear of the unknown. And fundamentally, trade agreements are always very, very complex. And I think the reaction at that particular period, like I said, was the fear. We weren't sure what was going to happen, especially because of the challenges which we had, which we still have in terms of the issues of electricity, the infrastructure, the question of non-tariff barriers, and the entire question of even our borders. But fast forward, I think it was a good thing that this consultative process, occurred. Those of us, especially in NACCIMA, we took a long view of history, reflected very well. We also had a committee that looked into it in terms of what is there. And early enough, we were able to make up our mind that, look, listen, this is an agreement which will be good for all of us. Let us sign. But you even know that within the family, occasionally, even husband and wife, some disagreement in terms of where to buy the market, where to buy gari, where to buy rice. That was a small little, complete meeting of mind within the house in terms of the organized private sector. But of course, eventually, I think the consultative process which the president put in place helped to harmonize views and then showed that indeed, at the end of the day, this is an agreement which is going to be good for us. But I also think that it was good that there was some kind of hesitation, which forced proper reflection, because it's a big canvas, so that there can be an understanding. The questions of rules of origin, the issues of services, the question of the issue of investment. We also have the areas of dispute resolution and other. And I think that consultative process helped to convince the entire country, various segments, various stakeholders, that this is an agreement which is good for us. And please don't forget, the vision of a continental market dates back to 1963. Our Prime Minister himself, the late golden voice of Africa, Prime Minister Balewa, spoke about it Nkrumah also spoke about it. Then fast forward, to the question of the Lagos Plan of Action.
May 1963.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about, May 1963. Then fast forward to the Lagos Plan of Action, 1980. 2000, which talks about the whole question of Africa being economically independent. Then we had the ECOWAS, the 1991 the agreement in respect of the African Economic Community. And then when the Continental Free Trade Agreement consultations and development negotiations started, it was our very own Ambassador Chiedu Osakwe, a colleague of mine, who was the chief negotiator. And then, of course, our minister, Enalame, was the minister, was the chair as far as the ministerial session. So Nigeria has come a long way, and there was no way you would envision it. So that's why I think it was a big step. It was a good one. And of course, eventually, proper reflections, the president took the courageous decision to put pen to paper and sign this agreement. Now, like we said, the hard work has just started.
So what is that hard work? How do we now ready ourselves to really maximize this opportunity?
The hard work has just started. I had my national president, Ajia Saratu Yali, also yesterday in the evening on Tuesday Night Live, and also envisioned it. The hard work, what is it? First, let me say that this is a private sector agreement. We must understand that. And one of the things we must do is that we must have a proper understanding of this agreement. There's too much cliches around, emotions about it. Good, but the hard work is, one, sensitization of the private sector in terms of what it involves. That's the number one thing, because a lot of people don't understand it. But we must let the private sector know that, look, this is your agreement. It is not government that is going to implement it. After that, then you now look at various segments. But let me quickly say this. If you look at the Nigerian banks now, you find them in various places. What I'm saying is that you find them in various places in West Africa. I was in Nairobi, East Africa this last month. GTB Bank, UPE, all those banks are there. In March, Ghana was recapitalizing its bank, 11 Nigerian banks. So effectively, if you look at the financial sector, banking and financial sector, in context of the AfCFTA, Nigerian banks are already on ground. And of course, we have Nigerian conglomerates that are all over the place. You find goods like Dudos, also sorts of Nigerian products all over the place. So it means that the Nigerian private sector can effectively play. Then talk about the aviation sector. Despite the problems and the challenges of the Nigerian aviation, if you want to go to some West African countries, it is the Nigerian airlines that you will take. What I'm saying with all in terms of this, the Nigerian private sector can play effectively on the canvas as far as the AfCFTA is concerned. So, but like I said, the hard work has just started in terms of understanding this agreement, in terms of also the advocacy issue, and then also the small and medium-scale industries. To capacitate them, to put them in a position, it means that they have to understand what it involves as far as that is concerned. And that's one of the things we want to start doing in NACCIMA through a dialogue series, so that people can understand where they can come in.
Well, Nigeria always enters into these agreements. We've signed so many protocols, so many conventions. But the problem is really in terms of follow-up.
Yes, sir.
So beyond the rhetoric, when we came for Shogun in Australia,
yes, sir,
there was a special focus on the sidelines, on mining. And, you organize many meetings with the mining sector and all of that. Yeah. I don't think anybody has ever followed it all. Now, what can we do in this particular case to make sure that Nigeria, again, does not hold the short end of the stick beyond the ceremony of just signing and adopting?
I think, you made quick reference to Shogun 2011, and then you remember that we signed an MOU with Australia in 4 areas: mining, agric, energy, and financial services. It is still there. You put your fingers on it, it is a question of implementation. So we should learn our lessons from all those areas. I served in the multilateral. I was involved in a whole lot of environment issues as well, including Basel Convention, electronic waste. Implementation. But let me also say this. I think, like I said, it's a private sector initiative. So members of the private sector must get themselves together at the various levels, using their various organizations to educate their members and also. But beyond that, we should also go to the subnational level, the state level. I'm not saying that it's the states that, but respective states must have an understanding, buy into this agreement, and work to provide the environment for the private sector in their states to key into the African Continental Free Trade Area. That is key and very important. You mentioned mining. There is effort now to diversify. You know, I became an accidental miner when I got to Australia. I mean, to borrow the words of Governor Coyote Fire. The potentials in the...
Oh, you mean Nasir Rufai, the accidental public servant.
The potentials in the mining sector is huge. And I give you an example of what. There is a 2016 mining roadmap for the growth and development of the Nigerian mining industry. It talks about shared mining prosperity. In context of the AfCFTA, because this is an area within the free AfCFTA which is key, it is important for the states, the respective states, especially the mining states. And when you talk about the mining state, we know them. 7 priority minerals: Osun, loaded with gold; Kogi, iron ore; Kaduna 2, iron ore; Enugu, coal; Ebonyi. All of them are there. They should look at the AfCFTA and see how these respective things can gel together. But like I said, since it's a private sector initiative, what they need to do, most of them, maybe set up a special purpose vehicle with private members of the private sector to develop the respective minerals in their respective state. Recently, we just heard that a new company, the first time set up a gold refinery in Ogun State to refine gold. This is the beginning of practical implementation of the AfCFTA in a way as far as that resource sector, as far as our mineral resource sector is concerned. Brilliant idea. It's a private sector initiative. The government and the state can only provide it, but they need to look at it properly and also develop their own roadmap at the national, the state level in terms of the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. They have small and small-scale industry. They can provide them. Hey, look at some of the citrus zones in Nigeria. Recently, we went on to Israel. I served 4 years in Tel Aviv in Israel, and I was often been very keen and very interested in the kibbutz. The kibbutz, you know the kibbutz, what it means in terms of they produce oranges and export. But by the time I went back to Israel, 21 years after, a lot of the kibbutz that were producing oranges and just selling have become juice production company.
They strike the value chain.
They strike the value chain. So this is what we should see, and this is how we should look at FCA. Let me say this, and then I'll go on to the next question. We're in Ghana for the GAPS. GAPS is the German African Business Summit. That Africa should no longer be seen just as a development partner, which they will give you 0.7% EDA. But Africa should be seen now as a business partner. This is a very, very key and very important perspective, new narrative. And then I discovered that the chocolate from Ghana, the Ghanaians are now added value chain, that about $9 million worth of chocolate is consumed of Ghanaian chocolate is consumed in Nigeria. $9 million. Turning their cocoa into chocolate and quietly. I think this is the perspective we should give as far as the AfCFTA itself is concerned.
Well, Tundu, let me ask you. Now, some people have said we're trying to imitate the European Union. But I know that, this is all within the context of the African Agenda 2063.
Yeah, 2063.
And it's all about integration. But if our regional economic blocks, the whole idea of regional integration, ECOWAS, SADC, and all that, with all the problems we're having there, how optimistic are you about, But let's take a short break, and then you can respond to that.
Okay, thank you.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. Still with us in the studio is Ambassador Ayoola Olukanni, former Nigerian High Commissioner to Australia and Director General now of the Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture. And we've been discussing the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And before we went on break, Ambassador,
yes,
I had asked you, how optimistic you are considering the problems we have with regional integration in Africa. Nigerian traders have issues in Ghana, in Guinea, in other places. Ethiopia wants to come and set up a domestic airliner in Nigeria. Stakeholders in Nigeria's aviation industry are kicking. And all of this, happens across Africa. In South Africa, there is xenophobia, and intolerance, if not racism. And, yet we're saying Africa Agenda 2063. How optimistic are you?
Well, I'm an incurable optimist about these issues. Maybe because of the fact that I spent a long time in Nigerian Foreign Service, and also especially on the multilateral. The key, let me say this, issues of global common and our destiny together as the human race or as Africans is real. I mean, I'll give an example in terms of the environment issues. I served 4 years in Nairobi, in Kenya, as acting Prime Rep to UNEP and UN Habitat. How do you want to deal with the question and issues of climate change? How do you want to deal with the question of issues of transboundary movement of waste? How do you want to deal with the question of trafficking in people beyond borders? So your reality, your existential reality is that, look, you have to be part of this movement, part of this issue. And like I said, don't forget that the vision date back to 1963. Despite the problems and difficulties, even within the whole question of Anglophone, Francophone, we still went ahead with ECOWAS. And we've not said because of the problems we're having in ECOWAS country, as well as maybe against Nigerians or whatever, we want to pack and say, okay, let us dismantle ECOWAS. We're always thinking of how strategically we can overcome the problems. And that's why in those days, you don't need a visa these days. You have your ECOWAS pass. The problems and issues will continue to be there. And if you look at across the world, the whole question of economic grouping, that is the trend. The EU, don't forget the Europeans slaughtered themselves for over 100 years before they said, look, listen, we need to come together, identify ourselves as Europeans first. Then they move on to the economic stage in terms of custom union, free trade area. Then they move on to have a common currency. So this is the reality of our existence today. It's a highly connected and globalized world. And don't forget, despite the problem and issues of which we refer to as far as xenophobia itself, the reality as far as South Africa, for example, is concerned, if I can give an example, is that it has no option in terms of trading within the framework of CDC and within the context of the AfCFTA, if I can come back quickly to that. In terms of the regional and value chain, you have no objection to work within the framework. The example has been given, South Africa, an industrial power that produces cars. You have Botswana that has a large herd of cattle. So implicitly, the leather chairs and others in those cars will come from the leather industry in Botswana. So that's how it works. That's how it's going on. Respective areas where you have your strength, you identify that and focus on that in terms of... The long and short of it is that there's no turning back as far as continued integration, economic integration across the world is coming. NAFTA, despite effort to work against that. I think it is...
President Trump hijacked NAFTA at a point.
Well, the 4 years of a president, or even say 8 years of a president, is nothing in context of the long period which the state and the government, with the country itself exist. I don't want to go back. I'm sure my message is clear as far as the issue which you raised is concerned.
It is, and I appreciate that historical perspective of where Europe started from. That's also food for thought. Yeah. So now that you're so successfully addressing doubts that may still linger in some minds, tell us about the benefits that this agreement has, especially regarding the informal sector and regarding gender equality.
Well, thank you very much. I think from the beginning, the gender issue has been part and parcel of the AfCFTA. And the figures are there in terms of maybe perhaps as much as about 80% in terms of informal trade. African women all over the place in different parts of the world. If we want to come home here, you find a large number of our women who are farmers. Then West Africa, the informal trading sector is dominated by women. You only need to go to Akbongo to see women who have come from across the places. The other time I was in Senegal, and I was shocked at the number of Nigerian women who are involved in textile trading. So it's a key and very important aspect of it. But the beauty of it is that the AfCFTA has now provided the opportunity to formalize the informal trading sector, especially with focus on women. And a lot of these women, like we know, I mean, at the borders, you know, harassment and others, they're not within the system. The AfCFTA now provides opportunity for a large number of these women traders to come into the formal sector because the rules and regulations in that area are a little bit friendly. But it means that we really have to help to get these women organized properly very well. There's so many women's groups. I come a long way in terms of gender and development issues. Way back when I started in the UN in 1986, when I served on the third committee and on the Commission of Status of Women. And also, by the way, in my house, I followed my women. I used to joke that I have 4 wives, my wife and 3 daughters. So I have no option other than to, be on their side, because they said, Daddy, when they were voting on that resolution to support women, where were you? I said, of course I queued behind the women. But on a serious note, what I'm saying is that the AfCFTA also provides opportunity, especially to bring in a lot of our women who are trading in the informal sector to the formal sector. They can always use opportunity in terms of single payment arrangement, the possibility of e-commerce, online trading, because these are areas which this CFTA. So you can organize them. If women produce clothes, for example, if you're saying you're producing the textile in Ogun State, Adire, it is possible to go and help and organize those women to even have a website in terms of trading, as far as that is concerned. I mean, so that I think is one of the issues which, of course, we will do.
When the Presidential Committee on the Impact and Readiness Assessment
yes.
of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement submitted its report to President Buhari, on one hand, they say, yes, we should go ahead and sign. There are many benefits, and you've talked about some of them. Yeah. But that committee also went further to say that Nigeria must insist on certain preconditions before, adopting the agreement.
Yes, sir.
And, they even provided certain things that we need to look at: building capacity, addressing the borders, worry about customs union, addressing the challenge of the ECOWAS CET, providing skills development opportunities and all of that. Yes, yeah. So the committee tried to define the role of government, although you say it's private sector. I would rather say it's a trade agreement. So where should the Nigerian government start from?
Well, let me clarify the last point which you made.
Yes.
Nigeria as a state on its own, sovereign state, signed that agreement, but implementation is going to be by the private sector. We need to get that right first. And when you sign this agreement, you sign reservations here and there. Very many countries signed and said that I will not start to be part of this until maybe the next few years. So that's what happens in terms of many of these agreements. We also have it in the area of the environment too as well. So the time will not permit me to be able to go into details of it. There are areas which we reservation which we have. But it is a good thing that we now have a National Office on Trade Negotiations. The NOTN, headed by a distinguished diplomat, somebody who's also been in the international trade arena. I'm talking about Ambassador Chidu Osakwe, who is the DG of that office. That office will also play a key role in terms of the proper understanding of what exactly is going to happen subsequently, as far as the AfCFTA itself is concerned. But like I said, at the end of the day, it's a private. If we don't have that understanding, we will continue to say, government, I'm not excusing government, because the non-tariff barriers, the whole question of infrastructure, energy, and others are key and also very important to make a success of it. So that members of the private sector who wants to go into this and implement and take advantage of it will also be able to do so. That is key. That is primary. That is very important. And I'm happy that if you look at what the CBN government rolled out recently in terms of the new economic, the roadmap for the Buhari administration in its second coming. One of the areas which I would like to, because I like to, like we use the word to concretize the abstractions. the 500 billion about to revive the textile sector is key and very important. Very, very important. So implicitly, the Nigerian textile industry, garment and textile industry, which used to be one of the pride of our place, has fallen on, on bad times. But this is a very good initiative. It is now led for the private sector to come forward in terms of to revive those textile industry. And also, like, I'm talking about the question of ethnic fabrics. I was in Kenya for 4 years, and I was shocked and surprised and impressed by what the Kenyans were able to do with the kikoi. We have so many things like that. The kente too as well. And of course, the various textile, ethnic fabrics which you also have. This is the way to go. Such initiative on the step up by government. We want to revive the textile industry. Let us look at it in context of how can we take advantage of the AfCFTA itself. We recently signed an MOU with Mauritius. Look at what Mauritius did with the AGOA and the textile sector. These are things, but like we said, we need to take practical steps and get us and get members of the private sector to wake up to it. And of course, like I said, government also, as far as its own responsibility itself is concerned. And of course, the media also has a very important role to play. We're discussing this now. I'm sure people are hearing, maybe picking a few things here and there. They will rise up to what Arise is doing today.
Well, quickly before we go, how does security fit into all of this,
of course,
into the framework?
Of course.
How can Nigeria engage other, private sector institutions if Nigeria is so insecure?
Maybe perhaps I can say that the issues of security is key. We can in fact even say that is the heart of the matter, and it should be a matter of the heart for all of us. We really have to work on it in terms of, because the image is what you get in terms of insecurity across the country must be addressed.
Well,
definitely.
thank you very much.
Sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.